Hello everyone. Well, it's hard to imagine, but Windows 95 celebrated its 30th anniversary last month. It's really been a long journey when you stop and think about it. I have been working with Windows since slightly before Windows 95, but mostly it was on Windows 95. And I wanted to talk about that anniversary today. I know I'm a little bit late to the party, but I also wanted to talk about what the impact of Windows 95 has actually been. If we take a look at Windows 3, the 3.1, 3.11 era, this is what we were dealing with. Now, Windows itself back then was not a standalone operating system. It was a program that you installed on top of DOS. And so when you were running applications or when you started Windows, this is all you got. You got the program manager, and then this is one of the open menus here, which is main. There really was no desktop. There was no task manager. I mean, this area behind here can be considered a desktop because you could minimize to it. But no taskbar, no start menu, no clock, no nothing. You got this, and all of your programs went into these little folders. If you close down the program manager, you ended your Windows session. And if you look, the windows are even slightly foreign to us because you have a minimize and a maximize button, but then you have this menu over here. What you would do is you would double click this to close the window, or if you single clicked, there would be a menu that would pop up and you could choose close that way. So that's what we lived with from the early 90s up until Windows 95. Now Windows 95, on the other hand, I wish I could demonstrate it, but I don't have a working Windows 95 system. This is a pretty radical departure from the Windows 3 era. If you look at it, you have your start menu pops up. You can drill down into what you want to run. You have a task manager at the bottom with everything that's open and running. You have a system tray, which is right here. There's nothing running in it, but there it is. And then you also have a clock. And I think it's this desktop paradigm, because you can see we actually have a desktop with icons that we can click. It's this desktop paradigm that really is Windows 95's biggest impact. Also, look at the windows that we're dealing with here. You can see we have the control panel open, and you'll see that minimize and maximize are here just like they were, but the close button is on the far right. You don't have to double click it. All you have to do is single click it. You also have a status bar in these windows, and you also have a little drag area where you can make the window bigger or smaller. And if you think about this, I'm going to go ahead and run this. I have a small application that I was demonstrating in one of my previous videos. If you look at this, not a whole lot has changed from the windowing perspective. I have a window, I have a minimize, a maximize, and a close button. Buttons at the bottom, a status bar, hard to see, but the status bar is in there. And I have a little box here where I can drag the window, can make it bigger or smaller. Just like Windows 95. So that is one of the bigger impacts, to me anyway, that Windows 95 has given us. And the whole desktop paradigm really hasn't changed very much. I mean, if you look at my desktop here, this is KDE Plasma. On the top bar, I have a system tray, I have a clock, I have an application start menu up here, I've got a quick launch down here, which they did add in Windows 2000, and then I also have a task bar over here. These are all, everything that's running. If you take a look at good old Windows XP, which I have a virtual machine of, if you look, even 6 years later, 5-6 years later, we were still dealing with the same mentality. You have a start menu, you have your quick launch. Of course, nothing runs here anymore. You have a taskbar, you have a system tray, and you've got a clock. Pretty standard. So let's see. How has this changed? Well, here's Windows 11. So this is 30 years later, and you'll see we've got a start menu, a task manager, a taskbar here, system tray, and a clock, and a desktop, just a regular standard desktop. So really, in 30 years, for the most part, we're still sticking to that exact same mentality. Which, when you think about it, that's kind of impressive for a paradigm like this to last that long of a period of time. And I think that one of the main reasons why, I mean, there are exceptions to this. In Linux, there are quite a few different tiling window managers that people like. I'm not the biggest fan of it, but you do you. When it comes to this desktop environment, I think that the reason it has stuck around for so long, many people will say that it was familiar. It's familiarity, and I don't think so. I think it's because it's a model that actually works. I mean, when you look at what Microsoft tried to do with Windows 8 and Windows 8.1, where they introduced that whole new funky desktop concept, which stunk, by the way. Many people were looking for any type of alternative they could. In fact, I found a program called Classic Shell back then that I used to install that would make Windows 8 look pretty much like previous Windows 7. Everything functioned just like what you see here on the screen. You got your start menu, taskbar, clock, desktop, all that came back. And I used to recommend that to people because people would talk to me and they're like, hey, I got this new system or new laptop and this Windows 8 sucks. And Microsoft learned their lesson, because after that they went right back to the standard desktop environment. And I think the reason it's so popular is generally because it works. I know many people may not agree with that statement. They'll think it's old and antiquated and all of this. And there have been different paradigms over the years. Ubuntu's Unity, GNOME 3. But there are many projects out there like Mate that try to keep GNOME 2, the GNOME 2 style, up and running. There's always KDE Plasma, which is what I'm using here. And you'll see it uses the standard desktop mentality. So yep, I was there. I used Windows 95 in college. So that would have been 97. Then we switched over to 98. I used 98 up until I left college. Windows 2000, if it was out, we weren't rolling it out yet. And then my first job when I was in Phoenix had Windows 2000. And I liked Windows 2000 based on NT. There was no more DOS at that point. Very stable, very easy to work with. I liked the quick launch. And then, of course, we got the big kahuna, which was Windows XP, which we had forever. And many of us still run Windows XP virtual machines just because there's older software that we want to run. And that's why I have an XP virtual machine myself, is I've got some older pieces of software to run. But that's really all I've got for today. I just wanted to wish Windows 95 a happy 30th birthday. One of these days I should really fire up a Windows 95 virtual machine just for the nostalgia's sake of it. I don't know if I'd ever do anything serious with it, but it's kind of fun to revisit the past. It wasn't always the most fun OS to work with. Plug and play was interesting. We used to call it plug and pray. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. You had blue screens of deaths from time to time. It was just a completely different era of computing. But I can tell you, this was a rather revolutionary and dramatic change from the Windows 3 era. And its impact on us has been long. I mean, it's 30 years, and we are still following some of the same mentalities that were introduced in Windows 95. And other than that, folks, happy coding.